Okay, last time we talked about the 50 millimeter lens and the wide aperture that you can get with one of those lenses. And here are wide apertures, and here's the effect that wide apertures have on an image. And I showed you several examples of these. And so with a very wide aperture, for example, 1.4, you'll see that the subject that you focus on will be sharp, and then things in the background or possibly the foreground will be more out of focus, depending upon your distance to the subject, etc. So this is shot with a 50 millimeter lens, and you get this beautiful bokeh or bokeh, as some people call it, where the background is soft but very pleasing. It looks very professional. And here's another shot taken with a 50 millimeter lens, and look how pleasing that is. And it adds depth and it gives you a more professional look usually in your photos. Now, I'm going to minimize this and turn on my camera and do an in-class demonstration. So I've got my DSLR hooked up to the computer with a cable, and I don't have a wireless setup for this. And I'm going to go to live view shoot. Now, if I can get it to work, here we go. So once again, we see Baby Yoda, or Baby Yoda, I mean, or Grogu, as they call him. I like Baby Yoda better as a name. And I have the camera set to f/22, but I don't want to have it set there at first. I'm going to go to the widest aperture on my 50 millimeter lens here, and it's only f/4. And that's not as wide, of course, as 1.4, but you'll see the effect it has on the image in a minute. So the bokeh or the bouquet is the soft part of the picture where it's out of focus. So forgive the poor lighting and everything. This is the best I can do in my office right now. I'm going to take the photo at an aperture of f/4. Now what you're going to see is what you should see is exactly what you saw in the preview. Baby Yoda's eyes are sharp, his jacket is sharp, but the background is out of focus. And if you wanted something in the background to be out of focus, you can put your DSLR in aperture value or aperture priority, depending on whether you have a Canon or Nikon, and it will produce this effect. Now, I'm going to change the aperture and use something that's more of a medium aperture, which is f/8. f/8 is a very common aperture that cameras use if you're just putting your camera on program mode. Now, you see here in the preview, it looks the same, but in the actual image, my camera closed down the aperture to f/8 as I took the photo. And then you will see when I compare them side by side that the pinwheel is now sharper than before. So let's go on down to a very small aperture, like f/22. And that's a very narrow opening, but it tends to bend the light together through the lens and forces all the light rays along a single, very parallel line. And now, even though it's the same in the preview, my lens aperture, it's called stopping down. I stopped it down to a smaller aperture. And now both things are in relatively good focus. So it depends on what you need to do with the photo. Let me turn my camera off and I'll show you the examples. So that's in the wrong place. Those are some things I downloaded of student work, but let's go to pictures. Okay. This was the first photo in an aperture of f/4.0. It's a wider opening. You see the difference in focus. This is f/8, and you also might notice it got a little bit darker. I could adjust that in editing, but it's a little sharper than the first one was. Now I'm going to go to f/22, and it's hard to see because it's so far away, but it is actually sharper back there. Now forgive the digital noise, but it's actually sharper than it was in the other two photos. And so you can adjust the focus on your camera or the depth of focus just by setting it an aperture value or aperture priority and playing around with that.